The engine Detroit tried to bury, and the world refused to forget summer 1972. Somewhere on a sun-bleached two-lane in Middle America, a $500 Dodge Dart just embarrassed a big block Camaro. The unlikely culprit? A six-cylinder grocery getter with a name only engineers loved, the Slant Six. To the suits at Chrysler, it was an afterthought. To backyard racers, it was a revolution. This is the story of the oddball engine that defied the odds, ignored the rules, and outlived nearly everything else in its class. Birth of the Angle, Chrysler's big pivot. By the late 1950s, Chrysler was in trouble. Their aging flathead six-cylinder had powered American iron since the Roaring '20s, but by now it was an antique. Meanwhile, a new breed of small, efficient imports from Volkswagen, Datsun, and Fiat were turning the tide. Chrysler needed more than a new engine. It needed an identity reboot. Enter the Valiant, a compact, affordable car aimed at a new kind of buyer. But the engineers ran into a major problem. The new inline-six engine they designed was too tall and too long for the Valiant's low-profile engine bay. The fix? A bold idea from project lead William Weertman. Tilt the damn thing. By angling the engine 30 degrees to the side, it suddenly fit like a glove. It also lowered the center of gravity, improved access to spark plugs, and gave birth to a name that would outlive most of Chrysler's own vehicles. The Slant Six. More with less. The engine that did everything. The Slant Six hit the streets in 1960 with more than just a cool tilt. It had rugged internals, an overbuilt crankshaft, and enough torque to move anything from sedans to delivery vans. Chrysler even experimented briefly with an aluminum block, a move decades ahead of its time. Though the cast-iron version became the workhorse, early Slant Sixes had innovative features like tin-plated pistons, chrome-plated rings, and intake manifolds that looked like they were lifted from a jungle gym. These banana bunch manifolds weren't pretty, but they were efficient, warming up air fast enough to satisfy new emissions rules. Chrysler had unknowingly built a tank. The secret weapon, hyper-packed fury. When Chrysler wanted to make a splash at NASCAR's 1960 compact division races, they tapped 426 Hemi mastermind Tom Hoover. His creation, the Slant Six Hyperpack, a hopped-up version of the 170 and 225 cubic inch engines that made up to 196 horsepower, a jaw-dropping number for a six-cylinder at the time. It was a giant killer. Valiants outfitted with hyperpacks left full-size muscle cars in the dust, with Ronnie Householder taking home multiple wins at Daytona. You could even buy a street-tuned version of the hyperpack kit from Mopar dealers. For the right wrench turner, this humble six became a performance bargain. Down under, the Aussie Hemi. While the Slant Six quietly built a following in the U.S., it was becoming a hero abroad. In Australia, Chrysler's local engineers took things a step further, bolting on a Hemi-style crossflow head and tuning it for performance. The result? The VG Pacer, a snarling six-cylinder beast that could hang with American V8s. Aussie tuners saw potential Detroit had ignored, with twin Webers, high-lift cams, and exhausts that screamed, the down-under Slant Six proved this engine was just getting started. The mountain climber and the taxi legend. Back in the U.S., the Slant Six wasn't just a straight-line sleeper. It was a hill climb hero. At Pikes Peak, racer Jim Paschal tamed the treacherous terrain with a Slant Six-powered Valiant, proving this engine could do more than just survive. It could win. And on the streets of New York, cabbie Sal Moretti turned heads when his Dartsea Slant Six rolled past 400,000 miles. Just oil and plugs, he bragged. Mechanics called it old reliable. Even in rural America, farmers used Slant Sixes to run irrigation pumps and generators 24/7, some of which didn't stop running for months, literally. Chrysler's dirty secret. Internally, the Slant Six was admired by engineers and ignored by executives. It wasn't sexy. It didn't wear a Hemi badge. And worst of all, it made the V8s look bad. According to Chrysler insiders, some execs wanted it gone. In 1958, they tried to kill it in favor of a neutered 318 V8, but budget constraints saved it. Building a Slant Six cost 60% less than a big block. It was the only choice Chrysler could afford. The catch? It got almost zero marketing support. The company quietly shipped them out, let the numbers speak, and focused their ad dollars on fire-breathing V8s. Some say that was by design. The decline, choked by regulations, the 1970s brought tighter emission standards, and the Slant Six, like all engines, started to suffer. Chrysler swapped carbs endlessly, from Carter BBS to Holly 1920 to the dreadful feedback carbs of the 80s. Power dropped, reliability stayed high, but performance vanished. The aluminum intakes introduced in the early 80s were prone to cracking. Cast crankshafts replaced forged ones. Mechanics groaned. Hot rodders wept. By 1984, the Slant Six was all but dead, limited to trucks and vans, barely making 95 horsepower. Underground resurrection. And yet, the Slant Six refused to die. Racers, backyard mechanics, and mad scientist tuners kept the flame alive. In Kansas, drag racer Bill Rhea built a 225 Slant Six that ran 12-second quarter miles with homemade parts and grit. They laughed, and he said, until I left them at the line. Australians hybridized it with turbo kits and cross-flow heads. In Mexico, it powered cars into the early 90s. In junkyards, people kept pulling running motors for their swaps. Even marine engines used Slant Sixes to push boats long after Chrysler gave up on them. Legacy of the leaning legend today, the Slant Six is more than an engine. It's a symbol of over-engineering, of underdog grit, of everything Detroit could have been if it had bet on brains instead of brawn. Its story isn't one of raw horsepower, but raw perseverance. No matter how Chrysler tried to hide it, undercut it, or forget it, the Slant Six survived, and even thrived, in the hands of those who understood its potential. Would it have saved Chrysler if properly supported? Maybe. What's certain is this: it outlived the big blocks, outwitted the boardroom, and won the hearts of drivers across the world. Not bad for an engine born out of desperation,